it's the American dream for us all to have a home. And I believe everybody should have a safe, secure home. That doesn't mean you can own it.
Can we pretend that airplanes in the night sky like shooting stars? I could really use a wish right now, wish right now, wish right now. Can we pretend that airplanes in the night sky like shooting stars? I could really use a wish right now, wish right now, wish right now.
The first decade of the 21st century saw an incredible boom and subsequent crash in the housing market.
These photos were taken in Brockton, which as a city ranks #1 in the state of Massachusetts for foreclosure. In 2008, over 1 million families lost their homes in the country, and that number was already beaten June 1st, 2009, with 1 million homes already foreclosed on. 2009 ended up seeing 2.82 million foreclosed homes.
We will explain how this happened, who is to blame, and how to fix it. What happened? This graph contrasts the increase in home prices with inflation. Clearly there was more than inflation at work, as prices increased at an ultimately unsustainable rate. One thing fueling this growth was increased leverage within the household. Times were good, it was easy to borrow money, and of course easy to spend money. In this graph of debt to personal income, debt could include any outstanding loans, mortgages, or credit card debt. As the graph indicates, at the peak, the average was $1.30 in debt for every $1 of income.
The Federal Reserve interest rate policy, or the Fed funds rate, is also part of the problem. The rate stayed below 2%, which during 2001 to 2004 was a historical low. These prolonged low interest rates made it cheap to borrow money, and consequently, adjustable rate mortgages, which are sensitive to interest rate fluctuations, were highly attractive at the time. Notice the point on this graph here from 2004 to 2006 and the ease of attaining a mortgage compared to 2007 to 2008. This graph is called the Case-Shiller Home Price Index. It is a composite of 20 statistical areas that combine to make a home price index, developed by Carl Case and Robert Shiller. Case started collecting data in Boston in the early 80s, and in the early 90s formed a company with Shiller to sell this information to markets.
This particular graph shows the S&P Case-Shiller Index, which begins in 2000, and the year 2000 is indexed to 100. We know what happened in Brockton. Now let's look at the rest of the country. Some areas experience a greater plunge in home prices than others, but virtually no one escaped falling home values in this country. From the peak to its bottom, the S&P Case-Shiller Index dropped more than 30%.
Whether you are still paying off a mortgage, owned the house, or are trying to sell, it is hard to stay afloat when your house, which is most people's largest asset, takes a 32% drop in value. In the midst of a crisis, when people are losing home equity, retirement funds, and general personal wealth, it is easy to point fingers.
But who is really to blame? In fact, the blame falls on everyone from government to average American.
The easiest scapegoats for the financial collapse are investment banks and ratings agencies. To personify this view,
A black minister from California, who keeps, like, his line is, it's not Bank of America, it's bad for America.
Investment banks bought and sold risky mortgages that created overextension of credit and encouraged destabilizing speculation. Meanwhile, ratings agencies gave risky mortgage-backed securities AAA ratings, which gave investors a false sense of low risk and high return. We've prepared a skit to explain mortgage-backed securities and show how they can potentially have destabilizing effects on the economy. Okay, in this section we're going to explain the process of securitization of mortgages and how they're sold from local banks to investment banks to become mortgage-backed securities.
this is Gail, the local banker who currently has $10 million in her reserve. And this is Megan, who is currently looking to finance her first mortgage to buy her first home. She goes to Gail looking for a $100,000 mortgage. After consideration, Gail approves Megan, and Megan walks away with a $100,000 loan for 10 years at 10% interest.
For numbers' sake and ease of explaining, we'll assume it's an interest-only loan, meaning that for the first 9 years she'll make her 10% payments of $10,000, and in the last year she'll pay $10,000 interest plus $100,000 in principal, and now she's completely paid off and Gail has made $10,000.
Now pretend there are 9 other home buyers like Meg, all looking for a $100,000 mortgage. Gail approves all 9 other buyers for a total of $1 million given out in loans. Gail's capital reserves have now dwindled to $9 million.
So clearly there's a problem with limited reserves to loan out. How can a local bank continue to support homeownership if they only have so much they can loan? In 1938, the Federal National Mortgage Association was formed, which is now known as Fannie Mae, and as part of FDR's New Deal. Their purpose was to purchase, securitize mortgages to provide liquidity to local banks so they could continue to lend.
Gail sells the loans and the right to the interest payments to Eric, who is an investment banker. He pays Gail $1 million plus various fees.
Notice that there's an incentive for Gail to sell these mortgages to Eric as she receives profit in the form of fees. Think of Eric as Bank of America, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, or Bear Stearns, who recently collapsed largely as a result of these activities.
In reality, Eric is actually buying from several banks. Suppose he buys $1 million worth of mortgages from 1,000 banks, totaling $1 billion in mortgages.
Eric, as a corporation, has the ability to securitize mortgages, which become tradable shares. These shares are known as mortgage-backed securities.
Now suppose Eric divides his pool into 1 million shares. These are worth roughly $100 apiece.
However, suppose there's high demand for these shares, as there was during the period in the early 2000s leading up to the financial crisis, and they sell for $110 apiece. If this were the case, Eric is made out as like a bandit with $100 million in profit. On a large scale, now the principal and interest payments from people like Megan are going to shareholders like Anthony.
Obviously, there will be some borrowers in this vast pool that will not make their payments. This is known as defaulting. In good times when housing prices are rising, if someone like Megan could no longer make her payments, she could sell her house for more than the mortgage is worth and pay the bank back. She would not have a house, but she would have a profit.
When you cannot sell your house for more than the value of the mortgage, the bank proceeds with foreclosure, since the mortgage is backed by the house itself. In this scenario, Megan loses her house and the bank takes a loss. Investors in mortgage-backed securities will factor their expected default rates when calculating the price they are willing to pay for the shares.
It is important to realize that as long as housing prices are going up, there will be a very low default rate, and the price of the shares will continue to rise as there will be only more demand for them.